So I'm really excited to chat with my next guest. He is an Emmy-nominated digital producer for NPR, OPB. He's the owner of Brushfire Creative Partners. He produced an amazing short film called Future Portland, about what it means to be black in Portland. And he's the author of this fantastic article in Oregon Humanities, the fall-winter 2014 article, called The Air I Breathe, Growing Up Tolerated and Underestimated in Portland. Please welcome Ifanyi Bell.
How's it going? That's quite a beard.
How'd I get the name?
You did all right.
Yeah, I did all right.
At first,
I've been practicing. I feel like I didn't do very well.
at first I thought you said Ebony Bell, which is my sister's name, and I thought I was in the wrong place. But I think I'm right. Well, this is very cool.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, no,
by the way,
I've listened to some of the other folks, and it's kind of cool to hear what people have to say. I was like very contented to be sitting down there listening. So
yeah, you got a chance to kind of see what it was or what was happening before you had to come in.
yeah, get the lay of the land. But a lot of people have some really cool thoughts and experiences about this place, Portland, and it's always cool and refreshing to kind of hear them.
So one of the things that you put in it that you started off was that the experience of, and I'm going to paraphrase, but the experience of being black in Portland is impossible to put into words.
No, it's possible.
And good, because that's what I'm going to ask you to do.
I mean, the article was somewhat emotional for me because I had been sort of subject to a lot of uncertainty in my life based on how I am perceived by other people. I think as an other or as an individual in a place where there are not many people like you, I think those questions about your identity really have an impact on you. And I think a lot of what my challenge was under those circumstances related to not simply an underestimation, but an assumption about where I came from. So I wasn't sure if people were asking me questions or giving me praise merely because I was black or my identity was steeped in a perception of blackness, and therefore my exception when compared to a larger population or a larger group of, say, students, for example, I wasn't sure if people were telling me, oh, this is great, you're doing so well, on an essay or a math test, if they were saying that just because I was black. And I think as a child in particular, having an adequate understanding of what you do and have that match up to your perception of yourself is extremely important. Otherwise, you spend your life questioning the value of your own work. And I think that a lot of black Americans, I think, are missing or have challenges with that idea. And they begin to develop a sort of schizophrenia about what their purpose is in certain places. And I think that's part of what that essay was about.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote it at the time, it looked like, when you were heading to Philadelphia?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of folks creative people in this town who sort of, after a certain point, leave Portland to explore other things in other places. And I think I had an opportunity to go there and do some work with some people that Philadelphia is a fantastic, very interesting place, very similar to Portland in some ways, but also very different. I think largely because of the history of that city.
And I hear the people tell you what's on their mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people here in Portland who also tell you what's on their mind. But I think that place, because of its history and because of its experience, it has a significant impact on the behavior of people, and I think it's noticeably different, largely because that city is, I wouldn't say historically black, but it's been a part of is a majority African American city, or a majority minority city in a lot a lot of areas. And I think that creates, as I was saying before, a more comfortable place. I think black people in that city are still other, but there is a sense of safety and a sense of perspective that is shared that creates a different sort of feeling. And I think at that particular point in my life, I think being there began to instill a different kind of confidence in myself, where I wasn't confused about how I felt about myself. And I think a lot of people experience that when they go to new places or when they travel. It's like people aren't quite sure what the rules are, what the measures are. And then as time goes on, you begin to gain a better understanding.
I would say that whether we want it or not, race relations are very much bubbling up to the surface right now. Right? That with the not even just the election, not even just election results, but with media coverage of the way that the election is portrayed, right? Yeah. That both issues of sex and gender and race are very much coming up right now.
No, for sure. I got a lot of calls on my phone on Wednesday morning. A lot of voice messages of people asking me, like, what's going on? What's happening? Some people angry, some people very sad. And I didn't have any answers. I think people were calling me because I think very early on in this election, I began to, well, not even this in the election, during the campaign, I think a lot of people, I said to myself, this guy, Donald Trump, there's something dangerous about him, not just silly and absurd, but something dangerous about the timing of what he was doing. I think a lot of people made a lot of correlations to people in the past and systems and patterns of society. I think all those things were very, very astute. But one thing that I recognized early on was these chorus of others that were being sort of incited and encouraged and emboldened by Donald Trump and what he had to say. And what I saw there was not just a division that was based on race or skin color or class, but something that was more important. I think it was a division, and I think we saw this in the election, but a division in who we've educated in this country. And I think Donald Trump is a representation of our unfortunate stratification based on education. And I think that's where we've become vulnerable as not just an American society, but as a global society. But Americans in particular, I think, have been programmed from the very beginning of this republic that we now live in, have aspired so fervently to materialism and to owning things that we've forgotten how to connect with people. One thing that I've thought of recently is the idea of growing up in a disadvantaged community, growing up in the hood or the ghetto. A lot of things you say is a lot of folks who have sort of moved from those areas and have gained materially, they say, oh, I'm going to leave the ghetto and I'm going to give back. But the process of leaving is predicated on the idea that I'm leaving because what is there is no longer good for me, and I'm going to get something different that is better. And therefore, I leave behind those who still have nothing or have less. I think that is a function of our programming. And we do so many things to separate ourselves. We call people things like white trash, or this person's from the hood, or this person's ghetto, and that creates a separation that reinforces what we see today. We leave people behind with substandard education, with people who are in groups grouped by themselves, so that we can't learn about each other. A lot of the separation that we see today is based on the fact that we simply do not know about each other. And we haven't had the opportunity to learn because at the first chance that we get, we leave people behind. But I'm sure that it is entirely possible to gain materially or financially and stay in the place where you are. But those are the things that now when we stratified so much that we have people living on this side of the country, on this coast, and we've isolated ourselves, we tend to forget who we've left behind until we see that we've left behind an entire nation of people who are simply uneducated and are very easily manipulated by those who have more than they do. And I think that's where Donald Trump comes from. He is the embodiment of a very particular disunity. And we are, as a nation, paying severely for it, I think.
Do you see, particularly for the concept of disunity and this stratification, which I think Portland is an interesting microcosm of because of the history of racism and how that has worked in terms of property lines and that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, as I said, this is something that is born into us. It's born into myself as well. I'm an American. That's another thing that I've come to terms with over the course of my life is I am of this. You can't be in and out of it. That's a common phrase, but we're all instilled with this idea of what is better than what is. And sometimes what we consider better may not be. I mean, look at what's happened with those who have find themselves as these intellectual elites and these educational elites and these wealthy folks. These are the people who have designed the internal combustion engine. These are the people who have decided that mining is the way to go. I mean, we are making choices that are not necessarily intelligent, right? Or that we continue to pursue them. And so it's very easy for people sitting on one side of a political spectrum or one side of an economic spectrum and say, those people are fools or these people are fools. None of us are benefiting from the separation that we've achieved. To say that these people who are in the middle of the country are uneducated and stupid completely just devalues them as human beings. But it's dismissive. But not only that, what do we say of ourselves? We haven't. Look at what we're doing. We're dealing with environmental crises that I don't think poor people are necessarily responsible for. So I think that creates a problem for us all as we just sit and squabble and throw things back and forth. But I think this idea of what's better or what's best, that's what we need to re-examine. I think we need to remove some of the ideas about materialism and how much money we need or how much money we have and begin to care about the value of human beings and their contributions to our global and national society.
You guys can clap on that one. Beautiful. So, is that the way forward then?
The way forward, I think, from my perspective, is I think it's dangerous. There is a clear and present danger that we face, but I think I see this republic, this country, as in its very adolescent stages, and I see the conversation as being very immature. At the highest levels of our government, we have people literally yelling insults back and forth. Regardless of how one side may not want to engage, they do. And I think that presents a particular challenge, but I think as any young person growing up, I have a 7-year-old, she's almost 7, she'll say she's 7, she's 6 3/4, but I have a young daughter, and I think that I see her and I watch her as she grows, and I'm one of those parents who tries to allow people to experience certain things, and I'm not gonna let her jump off a cliff, but sometimes you test boundaries. And sometimes it takes a skinned knee to recognize that perhaps a certain course of action may not have been the right one. A lot of parents tell their children, don't touch that hot glowing thing on the stove. It will burn you. And then sometimes that child will sort of look sideways and then put their finger in anyway. But I think what happens from that is the pain response will sort of not only rationalize what their parents told them, but it will be a very stark reminder of what not to do again. And I think in looking at this sort of from this national perspective, I think what we've done in this sort of separation from ourselves, sort of at a very moral level, I think we'll learn that maybe we shouldn't ever do this again. Sometimes, a lot of people have been saying sometimes you got to take a step back to go forward. I think that can be applied here.
thank you very much for coming in.
Sure, absolutely.
Chatting
Anytime.
and giving.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Thanks.
absolutely appreciate it.
Good to meet you.
Thank
Do I just go?
Funny Bell. We'll be right back after
Bark. Bark, bark.
Everybody got beers? Everybody good? My next guest is a past mayoral candidate, a former board member of the City Repair Project, helped with the Arleta Triangle Project, and is a member of Emerging Leaders in Environmental and Energy Policy. I'm so incredibly excited to welcome to the stage Sarah Iannarone. I'm told that the squeaks won't come through on the microphone, so
Oh, okay.
squeak it out.
All right.
Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I want to hear, you have a fantastic vision for Portland and what Portland could be, and what Portland was. I feel like you really have your finger on the pulse of the city. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I try. I have my hand in a lot of pots, so it keeps me connected at a variety of levels. I ended up running for mayor in the May primary because I thought the city was at a turning point. It's growing really quickly. And a lot of folks, I'm hearing them express dissatisfaction, not only with the trajectory of that growth, but who's getting included and benefiting from it and who's being left behind. Because I'm a small business owner, I've been a student at Portland State University, working on all kinds of boards and committees. I've been engaged at a variety of levels. And I happen to work with the mayor's wife at Portland State University. So I was watching this guy go to work every day and seeing what he did and what his job consisted of. And I thought, well, hell, I can do that. And might even be able to do it better. And with the interests of the people that I care about succeeding in this city. So my vision for Portland was this, is that, I came to Portland 20 years ago because I heard the buses were free, the air was clean, the trees were green, the music was dope, the coffee was strong, and I loved it. It was so phenomenal and accessible. We had time to create things here and create community. That's how I joined the City Repair Project. We'd paint intersections and just take them over, kind of radical action of taking over the commons. But yeah, I just saw that eroding. And so my vision was Portland as a place that's a leader again in civic infrastructure, because people have stolen our ideas from around the world. And I hope that they continue to steal them, because I want all the cities to be as sustainable as possible. But like bike lanes, eco roofs, green buildings, it's no longer innovative. So, where can we get out ahead? And for me, that was like being like the most human rights friendly city we could be. Like not just talk about equity, but come up with policy tools to realize that. And
What do some of those look like?
my goodness, we need to innovate them. I think one of the major ones we need to think about is anti-displacement, right? You hear an awful lot of talk about gentrification. And so how can we continue to grow and capitalize on the foreign investment, the people moving here, the talent, investing in talent locally, as incomes rise and people have accumulation of wealth? What does it mean for that to be evenly distributed across our population? And in many ways, the word socialism isn't always popular, but what does that mean to be redistributed, especially to people who've not had access and experience with that before? So it means thinking about when we make investments in transit and we're spending billions of dollars on a train, who's benefiting from that? Who's going to get displaced? Who's going to be able to live adjacent to that train? And who's going to be moved to the edge of the city where they're still stuck in traffic? Everybody's complaining about protests causing congestion. And I want to be like, y'all sit in traffic on I-5 every day. And no one ever complains about the fact that that's through a lack of investments in transit accessibility for people who don't live in the urban core and aren't close to those transit stations. So just sharing the wealth a lot, but also thinking with a bold vision. Like, yeah, this was a white supremacist utopian experiment once upon a time. And the utopian part we need to keep and get rid of the white supremacist part. And so what does it mean for us to think outside the box again. I had some visitors from Amsterdam. I work in international relations at Portland State, and had some visitors from Amsterdam, and they said, there's something so cool about Portland insofar as you think like innovatively about everyday stuff, even leaf blowers. Like, how can we figure out a way to get rid of leaf blowers, right?
I'm completely on board with the leaf blower piece.
I hate leaf blowers. So anyway, that's my vision for Portland is, #1 human rights city, that's our sustainability principle, not just saving the planet, but places that work for people in a nutshell.
You mentioned gentrification, which is something that I've heard you speak about, and it's definitely something that's severely impacting our city.
Yeah.
As it happens, I mean, is there a fix to it? Is the only fix to prevent it? Is there any going back? I mean, what is that? What do you do once it happens?
Well, I've used the notion of the broken teacup, that time you drop your grandma's cup on the ground and you glue it back together and you try to make it look like you didn't break it, but it's never quite the same. And I think the #1 thing that we can do is try not to break communities in the first place. That said, I do think, reparations, let's think about it. Think about who's been displaced and who's been suffering because of urban development policy in Portland for 150 years and the indigenous people who were here before colonialism. I mean, we've got a lot of work to do, white Portland, in making right what we've made wrong. And so thinking about that, I think that we think about those who've been affected historically and leveling the playing field and trying to right those wrongs. And I also think about, that principle of resiliency of first worst, which means we have to solve for who's being affected first and worst. And if that means people in East Portland are going to be disproportionately affected through policy, then if we solve for East Portland, then we've solved for all Portland. Or if we've solved for Black Portland, then we've solved for all Portland. But that's how you hit first, is the people who are being affected immediately and most dramatically, in my estimation.
I've never heard the concept of first and worst.
Well, now I know, everybody go out and hashtag that first worst. Let's go.
No, that's really good. We have in the city, as we're trying to grow now, we have kind of or as the city is growing, whether or not we're trying to or not, right? We have kind of is it a unique form of government, the commissioners? Is it just an old form of government? I know that it's not something that's been, or that doesn't exist in a lot of other cities.
It's uniquely antiquated. We're the only one that's keeping it now. So we have a commission form of government, which means that we have 5 city commissioners. It's also called a weak mayor form of government. So 5 city commissioners, all elected at large.
What does at large mean?
Meaning citywide, so there are no districts. So every single person who runs has to get elected by all of the people of Portland, city of Portland, which is just under about 700,000 right now. So that's a very, very big race. And the mayor and all of the commissioners have the exact same power, except for the mayor maintains 2 things: the control of the budget and of which bureaus are assigned to the commissioners. Interestingly, they hold both executive and legislative functions, so they administer the city and also set policy for the city. What that's done over time is create a place that we're very well known for civic engagement. The processes are very slow and responsive to the people of Portland because they're all accountable to all Portlanders. So they have very large constituencies that they have to respond to. At the same time, the power has become insulated over time. The costs of running a campaign that big are very high, and so they rely on big donors and big campaign contributions from corporations and businesses to make that possible. The geography that they have to cover, they focus on people with existing power, so that tends to be the urban core and downtown. And we're not getting, I don't think, good representation and coverage citywide. It also, in my estimation, makes them very uncreative when it comes to policy, because the first thought, if I were administering a bureau like transportation or housing, would be, oh my goodness, how is this going to pencil? And so my sense from city council is their first response is no, because. And I really want my policymakers to be saying, yes, let's. And then the bureaus come in and say, well, here's your financial reality. Let's rein that in a bit. But no one thinks outside the box and says, yeah, let's go, because they're always thinking, oh man, how's my bureau going to handle this, or how are my big donors going to handle that? And I just think we're weak right now.
So does the fix for that look like implementing districts, or?
Well, we're about to undertake some review processes. Our charter is coming up for review in 2018, and what I'd like to see, and I'm thinking about working on a research committee to explore this, of what would it mean for us to have district representation. You know, in Yakima, Washington, they were sued on civil rights because of the lack of representation for communities of color. By virtue of geography. And as someone who's out in outer Southeast Portland and works closely with people in East Portland, yeah, we don't have anything even close to representation downtown. And that's where most of the growth is going to be happening in the next 20 years. So it's that notion of no decisions about us without us. Like, all the decisions about what East Portland's going to look like in the future are being made without input from East Portland. So I think a combination of districts and at-large representatives, more importantly, thinking about the role of the weak mayor form of government and what does it mean in the 21st century when we're using all kinds of things like big data and smart cities and advances in communications technology to have a city manager who's actually running the bureaus based on data and not policy, and that, you know, there's a better tension between policy and bureau administration. I think would make us more efficient, more accountable, and it'd help us get some of our goals, like equitable workforce in the city like that, accomplished much more quickly.
For people who are particularly interested in helping you or working on these things or anything like that, I mean, what are the resources? Where do people start? Where does a normal average citizen who's interested in, you know, wanting to get involved or advocate or anything like that with policy, what do they do? Where do they even go?
Well, you know, the way I got involved in politics, and it's kind of funny, and I actually think the best thing to do is try and solve a problem. Like, a lot of folks say, oh, go join an organization or maybe go to City Club or read a book. I say go figure out a problem, try to solve it. When you start hitting the roadblocks in the system, you've found where you need to do your work, right? So for me, it was, I was a first-time homeowner out in a neighborhood. Our nickname then was Felony Flats. We've somehow accumulated FOPO along the way, so I think we're on the brink of gentrification ourselves. But, you know, and there's this amazing community center where we put in a pool and put trees and a playground, and yet it was on 72nd Avenue, which is an arterial where a lot of automobiles were coming and trying to go very quickly, trying to escape congestion on the freeway in 82nd Avenue. So my neighbors and I, we called the transportation department. We said, we'd like some crosswalks, please, because our kids are trying to get to this park. They can't get there. We're afraid they're going to get hit by a car. It wasn't working.
No.
So PBOT says, no, we can't put crosswalks there because it's too dangerous. Yeah, so if someone gets killed, we're liable.
Right.
So we thought, yeah, we get it. So then we're thinking, well, can we paint the crosswalks ourselves? And this was not even in, there's a current mobilization around
Right,
DIY
right, yeah,
crosswalks.
right, yeah.
I've been working on DIY crosswalks for over a decade, so this is nothing new. But so what
did it
we
before
did, we did it before it was cool. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been doing DIY crosswalks before it was cool. So we actually went and started working with the city and started taking over the intersection and building our own park and things like that. But finding the places where that system didn't work and how that language you need to use to work with the city, you realize these people work for you. This government is your government, and you need to do it. You can't rely on other people to do it. So I would say go get involved and solve a problem, and don't just work with the people, become the people who solve those problems. That would be my advice.
I'm going to make you do it. We've had a few.
Okay.
Do you got a spot in Portland that you'll spoil for us? That's a gem, hidden space.
Well, yeah, because I own it. It's called the Arleta Library Bakery Cafe, and it's on Southeast 72nd Avenue, and we do have the best biscuits and gravy in town, hands down. So if that's your thing, you better come see me.
There you go.
All right.
You heard it first. Is any gluten-free?
What?
No? Okay. Good. Very good. Very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect.
That
Sarah,
was fun.
thank you so much. Yep. Sarah Iannarone, we'll be back after this. Bye.